Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives. Josh, lovely to have you with us here today. Thank you for joining us.
No worries, thank you.
So you have just written an incredible play called Sunrise, which is a textured, powerful and beautiful play that deals with complex emotional issues including social isolation, parental bullying, perfectionism, anxiety, insomnia, paranoia, beautiful hearts and thoughtful sharing. So our listeners will resonate with some of those words, I'm sure. Can you tell us a little bit of background about why you put this play on?
Yeah, sure thing. So a friend and I were forwarded this grant application from a teacher of ours last year when we were in school, and it was for the Like Minds, Like Mine Community Grant Fund, which is run by the Mental Health Foundation. And he said, you two should apply for this and put a show on. And so we applied for it and then forgot that we'd applied for it. And then we got a call saying that they were giving us some money to make something, which was pretty cool. And so we started figuring out what we wanted to make, and we landed on doing this play about young people opening up about their experiences with mental health and finding out new things about themselves by putting it into words.
And how did you do the research to get all of the characters?
So we had 4 different writers that each created a character each. And so the characters kind of ended up being something that we were personally very familiar with. So my character was very much about anxiety. There was another one that was very much about social isolation. Another that was, this was one of my favorite ones is I found very interesting was one of our writers felt like they didn't really have any lived experience themselves, but they had had lots of conversations with their friends who had, and so she decided that she wanted to write about the friend who was always there for other people and the effect that it had on the friend, and yeah, I found that really interesting. And then perfectionism was kind of the 4th one. Yeah.
So congratulations first of all, because we know it was a sellout. My own son went to watch it. We've heard incredible reviews. And obviously mental health is a big topic for your generation. Tell us a bit about what it's like to be 19 years old. Are you 19?
Yes, correct.
So I've got the right age. 19 years old and facing the world today in terms of choosing careers, in terms of the characters that were portrayed in the play, in terms of COVID, overstimulation, overwhelm, media, social media. What's it like for you personally? What's been your experience of mental health in your generation?
So for me, I had a little bit of depression when I was about 10, but I don't really remember it very well. But the big thing was last year I suddenly, out of nowhere, had crazy anxiety, and I still don't know why. And I've always kind of been, I would consider a very confident and optimistic person. And then suddenly I just had this ridiculous anxiety, and I had no idea where it came from. And like, I think I remember the first experience was I was just about to go to work actually, and I was shaking and crying, and I didn't know why, and I tried to eat a banana and I vomited, and then I went to work, and my supervisor asked me if I was okay, and I said, I think I just had a panic attack, and she was lovely and sent me home. But that was kind of the first thing I remember, and then it was a regular thing from there. And so it was kind of very unexplained for me. It came really out of nowhere, and yeah, so that was weird.
You went through a lot of symptoms
experience
there, which was really interesting, because we do talk to our guests about different symptoms, and anxiety can come out in many different ways, and you said quite a few physical symptoms then, and sometimes it's not explainable, you know.
Absolutely.
And a lot of mental illnesses aren't. We try to have explanations for things. You know, if you break your leg, you can go, oh, it needs a cast on, it's broken. Whereas mental illness and mental health is a totally different ballgame, isn't it? You can't sometimes pinpoint it. But how did you find that you worked through it yourself?
It took me a while to kind of figure it out, because the symptoms were kind of inconsistent as well. I found that like there was kind of like a cycle of like the symptoms would be one way for like 3 weeks, and then it would kind of shift and be slightly different. So the first few weeks, I like every time that I ate, I would throw up, and so I just ate anyway because I didn't want to starve myself, and dealt with the consequences. But yeah, and then it was different week by week, and kind of the way that I started dealing with it, that's has kind of become part of the play as well, in the character that I wrote, was externalizing it and trying to think of it as an external thing rather than this is my mind and these are my thoughts. I started calling it a different person. I called it Pablo because that was the first name I thought of, but I didn't know anyone with that name. And yeah, kind of thinking of it as a separate thing really helped to make it feel like I could shut it out a bit more, I guess.
It's really clever.
And it also made it much easier to talk to people I was close to about, because I didn't have to use scary words like anxiety when I was feeling crap. I could just say Pablo and I'd say yep, and yeah, it was as easy as that.
And you're using the words talking about, and Joe and I are all about empowering people to talk about their feelings, to be vulnerable, to speak the truth, so that we normalise feelings. And we also normalise the fact through the teen years with emotions and insecurities and fears, it's very normal to go through anxiety and confusion. We don't need to necessarily put it into a mental health bracket. A very quick assumption from a lot of adults nowadays is to respond by going into the counselling, the therapy, the psychology route. But actually, we are all about saying these are very normal feelings to have. How do we address them? I would love you to pick out, we've got 4 characters in your play. We've got Chloe, we've got Ben, we've got Lee, and we've got Jamie.
Correct.
I'd love you to pick out one of them and explain what you love about their character and how it played out on stage.
Yeah, sure thing. I would like to talk about... I'll talk about Ben. So Ben was quite an interesting one. He was an autistic boy who only really was friends with his mother, and he kind of never got understood in school and was always made fun of and rejected, and so he just learned to just ignore all that, just that's not part of his life. He's just got him and his mum, and he likes watching movies. And his mum kind of forces him to go along to this session to meet new people and hopefully talk a bit. And Ben slowly kind of, they make the effort to be patient with him and reach out to him and get him talking about what he likes. And slowly he learns to kind of trust them and make friends for the first time.
It's really nice. And you know, that's like a really nice message for our listeners as well, because sometimes we actually just need to be kind and compassionate to others, don't we? And actually look outside the box and take people as they are, because we're all individuals, and there's something special about every person. And if you actually take that time to listen to another person, to get to know them, you actually find such real gems of joy within them, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And he ends up having some of the most beautiful moments in the play where like every single performance would have the audience going "no" when he exits, because it's just the most heartwarming, beautiful thing. Because like when he enters, he's all cold and he's responding with one-word answers, but then at the end he's like he doesn't want to leave.
Oh,
yeah.
See, we're all doing R already. Oh,
yeah.
And you were at a local school that had a learning support unit and a unit attached to the school with social inclusion. And I have to say that from my experience of living in the area, in the community, the greatest joy I've ever had was the annual dance show in the theatre, where the community would be moved to tears when everybody was dancing together and everyone
their
was
dances are
inclusive.
fantastic.
Yeah, and I have to say I was so moved by the interaction of the students at school, the lack of prejudice, and being all inclusive as opposed to segregating different sectors of society.
Yeah.
And I think what you've been doing by putting the play on stage is normalising different case scenarios. And I think my son was particularly moved by the actor who played the rescuer, because as you say, that's not necessarily a role that would come under mental health, is it?
Yeah,
but the rescuer is a very much prominent figure in society. We rescue, we think we're doing good, but actually when we're rescuing, we're often seeking a need in ourselves, which is insecurity, and we're meeting a need within ourselves, which is to feel good, is to put our ego back on stage. And also we sometimes disempower somebody else from going through their journey and their work by rescuing them out of a situation. Tell us a little bit about Lee, who addresses insomnia.
Sure thing. So Lee is the one that you just mentioned, who is always there for her friend. And so the first scene we see where Lee is talking about her problem for the first time, she receives a phone call from her friend in the middle of the night on a school night. It's like 4 a.m. and she's like, "What is going on?" And they kind of slowly have this awkward conversation where they're both trying to figure out what's going on. And Alex, her friend, eventually says, "I can't sleep. I remember that your voice when you speak helps me sleep. Can you read to me?" And so Lee reads her a story, and at first it's kind of like a quirky, funny thing, and Lee's happy to be there for her friend and stuff. But then that becomes the only thing that happens to help Alex sleep, and now it's happening every night. And when it gets to the point that Alex is starting to get better and can sleep by herself again without needing Lee reading to her, Lee still has this feeling that she's not there for her friend when Alex doesn't call. And so she's up all night, even though Alex is fine and sleeping fine again. Lee's up all night waiting for the call and getting anxious about it. And she still thinks that the problem is with Alex, not her. And so eventually, near the end of the play, she has this moment of realization where she's like, "Oh, I'm the one with an issue now."
Again, that's another really important message, isn't it? Because it's showing that we all need to have really healthy boundaries in place. We can put ourselves there for other people if we are healthy individuals, but as soon as then we are not as healthy as what we should be, body, mind, and spirit, then it becomes like a different kind of need-based, like a codependent relationship, doesn't it? So yeah, we all definitely need healthy boundaries around us, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah. And really, Alex needed to go and see a professional is what needed to happen. But we purposefully made her kind of younger, like 14, 15, because I feel at that age there's very much this attitude of when your friend comes to you with something like that, it's like, I am Atlas holding up the world and this is my secret to keep and I've got to help my friend and this is just me. And like as you get older, you begin to have a little more of a mature perspective about it and say maybe we should bring other people into the conversation. But
that's a really, I totally agree with you, because that's what I say to my children. I've got various different age of teenagers, and we have different friendship groups coming into the house, and I do reiterate to the younger ones time and time again, it's not your responsibility to take on other people's issues. They need different forms of help. You are still a child. You do not have the maturity to deal with this. But you're right, at that age group, they really do think that they can. And you can tell because they're just moving from that childhood into, they don't really know where they are to adolescence, isn't it, when they haven't yet reached adulthood. It's a really awkward age.
I was talking to a girl the other day who I picked my daughter up at a party, and there was a girl there that said, "Oh, I had to sit with a friend all night because she was vomiting and vomiting all night, and then I had to help her get home." And I said, "But that's amazing that you've done that. Do you have to do that regularly?" And she said, "I do it to every single party that we go to." And I said, "Look, it will come to a stage where you'll acknowledge that if you're there for her, rescuing her, she's going to do this, manifest the same behaviour at every party because there's somebody to look after. At some stage, if you pull back, she's going to have to address how she's going to get home. Does she need to throw up at every party?" And she suddenly said, "Gosh, I see that maybe I've empowered her to carry on with that behaviour because I've been rescuing her." And this is how we develop codependent relationships, isn't it? We, two friends, whether it's a relationship, whether it's parents and child, we have codependent relationships where one depends on the other. As you say, it might be one that appears to depend on the other, but it's the other one also depending.
Yes,
so it's that's why it's codependent. So Joshua, you're only 19. You're at a very young age to write a play. You've taken a gap year before going to university. You're reading music next year. What has been your greatest learning experience by putting on this play and writing it?
That just doing it is kind of the best way to go. I mean, I've learned heaps of smaller things about the technicalities of how to go about the process and things, but overall, I'd say I learned like kind of an attitude thing, which is just to go ahead and do it and get into the meat of it and then figure out how it works rather than... I tend to spend a lot of time planning and then I spend too much time planning and then I'll start writing the scene or whatever or whatever I'm going to do, and then I'll find that what I'd planned hadn't really worked, and then what I need to do will become clear when I start writing it. So I need to just spend time actually doing the thing, and that applies to other things as well, not just writing. But yeah, just get into it.
We love that. Our motto is say yes and then figure out how. And there's
Yeah,
a whole year for us.
exactly,
We just say yes, and then we go, but you're right, throw yourself in. There's no better way to learn on the job, is there?
Yeah, no, there were heaps of hurdles that like we identified at the very beginning of the process that we didn't know how we were going to solve, and we just kind of had to trust that it was going to happen. And still, there are things going into the future with the future of the theatre company that we don't know how we're going to do yet. But yeah, it was things like where we're going to do it. And then we happened to run into this lovely guy, Jeff Allen, who was like, "Oh, you can come and do it in the theatre that I'm running," and we were like, "Sick." That's great.
I think I've trust in the universe. That's another big message we give out all the time. We just trust, don't we? So we go, okay, we're going to do this and it's going to come to us. We've put the energy out there.
But it's such a strong message to your age group as well, because it's so easy to leave school or come up to leaving school and think, what am I going to do? I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to go to university. Don't really like the jobs out there, and just sort of sit and do nothing and go online, watch YouTube or play games. The message to your age group is, if you've got an idea, just run with it before you know how to do it. We did that when we set up the podcast. We have no idea about podcasting. We're hopeless online, hopeless at tech. And we just sat there with YouTube saying, how do we do this the whole time? But we had an idea, and we just thought, we'll run with it. And the other scary thing about, obviously, taking risk and trying something new is, what if it fails? And your message, again, to listeners is, if it fails, you find another way to do it. You just keep going. If you don't know where you're going to host it, just wait for that door to open. If you open that first door and say, we're going to do this, then other doors open along the way.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you can always try different avenues. And that's such a positive message for your age group. And clearly you've got lots of passion and energy that you've put behind it. How did you find writing it with the four of you that wrote it with it?
Yes, including me, yeah.
And how did you work together?
It was a fun process, yeah. So I kind of met them all individually to talk about ideas for what they wanted to do, to make sure there was kind of a balance in what we were representing in terms of issues and like internal factors versus external factors and things like that. And then I sent them all like a big document, like 5 to 10 page document about like what the overall structure would be and like what kind of tone to follow and how long the individual scenes could be and things like that. And then they just started sending me scenes, and I set deadlines that they ignored. And so they'd send me scenes, and I'd be writing my own scenes and things like that. And I'd give feedback and start figuring out how it was all going to fit together. And yeah, it was lots of fun. That's awesome. It took ages, and that was another thing that I just kind of had to have faith in, because having the structure in which we're having one cohesive play that's made up of scenes written by 4 different people is kind of weird, because normally you'd have kind of like an anthology structure for that, where it is going between separate stories, but like this is one continuous story that we're telling. And so I kind of had to trust that it wasn't going to turn out feeling very disconnected, because we were going through these different writers throughout the whole play, and I think there's still some transitions that are a bit iffy, but for the most part I think it works, which is nice.
And after such great success, what's the plan for the play now?
So we're looking into doing another season, which is very exciting. I just put in an application for a place today, so hopefully that'll happen. Yeah, so I've got some rewrites to do, but nothing too major. But yeah.
And if there's any listeners that are thinking, gosh, I'd love to see it, watch it when it comes out, is there any way we can follow the updates or find out when it's coming out, or contact you? How can people contact you?
So you can find me on Facebook as Joshua Downs, or on Instagram as, I think, at Joshua Downs 1. And you can find the theatre company, Seed Theatre Company, that's putting on the play at Seed Theatre Company on Facebook and at Seed Theatre on Instagram.
Brilliant. And one last question. It's not always easy being a 19-year-old. In one sense, you've got your whole life ahead of you, and it's exciting and there's opportunity there. You can start fresh, not like you do when you're in your 40s and 50s. But it's also hard times, full of challenges. It's full of fear, insecurities. What is one message you would put out there to listeners who think, gosh, how courageous to do a play. I don't know what I want to do.
Well, I found that that this year has kind of been the year of not quite being able to do it yet at this kind of age. Like we got a lot of people saying no to us, which is fair enough because we're young and don't have many credits to our name, and people kind of need to trust that they're working with trustworthy people, and it is hard to keep going when you're hearing no all the time, which happens a lot in the theatre world. But yeah, just to keep going, and eventually it'll happen. Yeah.
Congratulations, because by pushing through and not hearing the no, not accepting the no, you found a theatre company that did take you on. You've had amazing accolades. You've, obviously going to put it on for a second season because it's been so successful. And we can't wait for some of our listeners to be able to come and watch the second season. So congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us today, Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Paul. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.